is the Hot Zone. Engaging with the news in a whole new way, international war correspondent Chuck Holton brings insight into areas of crisis and lets you help those affected.
Hey folks, Chuck Holton here. Thanks for watching the Hot Zone. I just cannot seem to get a break and slow down a little bit. I just got back from Armenia. Took a couple days to try to find my desk at the house, and now I'm off on another mission to the Darien Gap. And I can't talk a lot about it until it's over, but it's going to bring you some on-the-ground information that you're not seeing anywhere else. So stay tuned for that. In the meantime, I was looking at some of the things going on in the news, and one of them caught my eye. It's a volcano that exploded in the DR Congo, and specifically in a town called Goma, which is on the east side of Congo, right on the border with Rwanda. Now, I know that because I went to Goma several years back and did a couple of pieces for CBN based on what was going on there. Now, surprisingly, I went back and found those pieces, and they're very relevant to what's going on today. Not much has changed in that part of the world, but add to the misery that's going on in Congo from the fighting between different factions, the corruption, the absolute rape of the natural resources there. Congo is one of the most resource-rich countries in the world when it comes to things like cobalt and lithium and gold and diamonds and, just natural resources, minerals and things like that. And because of that, it's been just stripped. I mean, that country, so many people in that country work in absolutely deplorable conditions. There are some really amazing documentaries that have been done about that. I'd love to go over there and do one myself someday. But in the meantime, I wanted to show you this, one of the pieces that I did while I was in Congo about women who have had to band together to try to protect themselves from peacekeepers. And the reason I wanted to show this to you is because this is something that's common around the world. Almost everywhere I've ever been, when you find the United Nations at work, they bring a lot of misery along with whatever good that they do. In this case, the peacekeepers that were sent into Congo to try to make peace, or at least, keep these different factions from killing lots of civilians, ended up being the very ones that these Congolese women had to worry about raping them. And they had to band together. They pooled whatever resources they had to hire a militia group to protect them from the peacekeepers, which is pretty ridiculous. It's unfortunate that so many times peacekeeping forces come from areas that don't know peace. You have, people showing up with MINUSTA in Haiti, for example, the UN peacekeeping forces there, bringing cholera in. They're from Sri Lanka. They're from, third world countries. And the lack of hygiene in their camps ended up killing probably over 100,000 people. I mean, it's incredible how devastating that was. Go over to the border between Israel and Lebanon. The peacekeepers there very often end up siding with the terrorists rather than just keeping the peace. We could go on and on. There's so many places where I've seen that peacekeepers, UN peacekeepers, seem to do more harm than good. And it's really unfortunate because the United States spends a lot of money, not just on those forces, but they also spend a lot of money trying to put right these things that really don't have much to do with the United States, but they're just a moral good that needs to be done in the world. So, for example, the African Union troops in Somalia that the United States paid for, we funded these troops to go into Somalia and try to bring order, and that's a fool's errand if ever there was one. So anyway, suffice it to say, I went and did a story about these women, and it's really about these victims, and not so much about the United Nations or about the monsters that would rape these women. But it is still a big problem. Sexual violence is huge in Africa, and I wanted you to see this, and so that it could spur some thought on your part. But also, I wanted to show some of the more current footage from Congo of the volcano, because it's amazing. The lava that's eating the city of Goma right now, slowly burning it down, and the people trying to fight it with, squirt guns practically. I tell you, lava is no joke. You don't want to get too close to it, and there's no putting it out. I mean, unless you have the ocean, it's just, you're not going to put it out. So just get out of there. Goma is an amazing place, but it's also a very wild place. When I was there, I just want to tell you one quick story, because this is kind of funny. I flew into Kigali, Rwanda, and I had to get to Goma, which is about a 2.5 hour taxi ride from Kigali. And I was not feeling too hot, so I just sort of poured myself into a taxi, whichever first taxi I found, told him I was going to Goma, and just fell asleep. And so I'm glad that he actually took me to Goma and didn't take me to like the terror training camp or something. But I showed up in Goma. I had never been to Congo, but I knew a guy who had. And so I asked him if he knew anybody who could help me. He gave me somebody's number, and I started calling around, calling that number, trying to get a hold of this guy in Congo that I'd never met. It was a friend of a friend, to see if he could function as a fixer for me or something, driver. So he said he would. When I finally got a hold of him, he said that he'd be ready for me when I got there. And so I was calling him along the way whenever I woke up and saying, I'm almost there, whatever. And he said, I'm ready for you. So I get to the border, and the border's closed. Taxi drives away, leaves me on the Rwanda side. So the guy tells me I have to wait until tomorrow to get across. And I'm thinking, there's no place to stay over here. What am I going to do? So I'm calling my guy over there in Congo and saying, hey, I can't get across the border. The border's closed. And he says, look, just come across anyway. And I'm like, what are you talking about? They got the bar down on the road. They got soldiers there. I can't just walk across the closed border. And he goes, yeah, they don't care. Just salute them and smile at them, and, they'll be fine. Look, I've been waiting here all day. I've got a place for you to sleep. It's just 200 yards more, and you can make it, and it's not a big deal. And I'm like, oh my gosh. So I texted Connie and I said, pray for me. I'm crossing a border illegally here. So I just put my rucksack on and started marching, and marched right past the soldiers that were guarding the border, and sort of gave them a salute, and they kind of went, hey, and I just kept going. And 200 yards later, same thing, walking into Congo, and I made it. I couldn't believe it. So there's like 200 people milling around there, and I'm thinking, how the heck am I going to find this guy that I'm supposed to hook up with? Then I realized, well, wait a minute, I'm the only white guy here, so I'll just stand here and he'll find me. And sure enough, after a couple minutes, a guy walks over, and he walks up to me and says in very good English, he says, are you Norwegian? And I thought, is this some kind of secret code or something? And so I said, well, my wife's Norwegian. And he said, yeah, that's great. Okay, yeah, I'm your guy. And I was like, what was that all about? Like, did I even ever say anything about the fact that my wife is Norwegian? Okay, whatever. So I went with this guy, and he took me to a place where these French nuns lived, right on the lake of Lake Kivu there, and put me up with the nuns. I've never slept in a nunnery before, but there I was. It was all by myself. I was the only non-nun that was in this nunnery, and woke me up the next morning, fed me like the worst breakfast I've ever had in my life. The hot water carafe, when I went to push the button on it, like 25 cockroaches came out of the carafe, and I just was like, ah! It was not cool. But it was Sunday, and the guy had asked me if I would go to church with him, so I did. Went to church. I got there. It was like 800 people, Congolese people, having a great time, just worshiping God. And I was like, this is great. And he's like, good, you're preaching. And I was like, what? And I didn't know I was preaching. So 3 minutes later, I'm preaching. We had 3 unbelievable days there, driving around, seeing the refugee camps, and, was going to visit these women that I'll show you here in a minute. And then when it's time for me to go, the guy takes me back to the border, to the bus. I got to cross the border into Rwanda, get on the bus. And I'm thinking, wait a minute. How am I going to get back across the border? I didn't ever get my passport stamped getting into the country, so I'm actually here illegally. And I could be in trouble now. So the guy says, no, you'll be fine. He says, well, I got to go. Enjoy your family back in Norway when you get there. I said, why do you keep talking about Norway? I'm an American. And he goes, wait, what? I said, I'm an American. And he goes, I was supposed to pick up a Norwegian guy. So I had spent 4 days with the wrong guy. I'm hoping that the Norwegian guy, whatever he was doing there, got my guy, and then he was okay. But whatever, all's well that ends well. And I was able to get out of Congo without a stamp in my passport, even though the agent at the border noticed. And she looked at me and gave me this very sober look. And then she pawed through my backpack, and I thought, oh, here goes, I'm about to lose everything. And she pulled out a Snickers bar I had in the bottom of my backpack, and she was like a big black woman. She pulled out the Snickers bar and looked at me, and I just went, all yours, lady. And she stuck the Snickers bar in her pocket and closed my bag and said, thank you very much, and off I went. So that was my trip to Congo. Africa is such a magical place and such a confusing place for gringos, but I hope I get to go back sometime. In the meantime, take a look at this piece from a few years ago from Congo before it got eaten by a volcano. I'm Chuck Holton. Thanks for watching Hot Zone.
More than 5 million lives lost and millions more displaced over what many international leaders say is simple greed. It revolves around Congo's diamonds and minerals, which dozens of armies and militia groups want to control. Rape and sexual violence run rampant here. This woman was victimized by a squad of soldiers. With nowhere to go, she left her village and found a group of women with similar stories who had banded together for protection. They now live in this compound with more than 100 women and girls, all victims of rape and sexual abuse. U.S. Secretary of State Hillary Clinton recently visited here and called for the brutalizing of innocent civilians to stop, specifically sexual violence against women. The United States is pledging some $17 million to help stem the tide of abuse in this war-ravaged nation. Mrs. Clinton said those who use rape as a weapon are guilty of crimes against humanity. The UN has recorded at least 200,000 cases of sexual abuse against women and girls in the region. More than 7,000 cases involve sexual crimes committed by government soldiers. Human rights groups are calling on Congo's government to do a better job of protecting the innocent. But until that happens, these women, along with more than 250,000 refugees, continue to live in fear, wondering when, if ever, their nightmare will end.
The Hot Zone is produced by Amy Holton and Livefire Media.
Copyright 2021.